You're listening to Tapestry, a podcast by a music lover for music lovers. I'm your host, Kelly. Music is a thread that weaves a course throughout our lives. Join me on a journey to unravel that thread and bring you the stories behind what inspires musicians to create. Side note, Tapestry is an uncensored podcast. Don't say I didn't warn you. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to episode 61 of Tapestry. So I've hit a little bit of a stale point, I think, in some of my guest choices due to no fault of their own, but just me focusing a lot on the stuff I'm already comfortable with. And even though there will be a little bit of discussion of progressive metal in this episode, the focus was actually intended to be on something totally different. And I'm not sure how much more different it can get than interviewing a friend of mine, Mark J., who happens to play in some Eastern European folk bands. So even though we do touch on the topic of progressive metal a little bit, because he is a guitarist and he loves to shred, I reached out to Mark because I just wanted to switch things up. We ended up talking about all sorts of things, including how his Eastern European heritage has influenced his musicianship, what it's like backing up a Greek bouzouki band in the area, all sorts of stories about his tenure as a Nashville country guitarist, and many other stories. Here's a little bit of his track Temple of Passion to start the episode off. Mark, thank you for being here. We are officially starting now, I think. And everybody listening will not know all the technical difficulties we went through to get here, but as a result of that, we are going to start this interview off with some alcohol delivered to my mailbox yesterday by my guest here, Mark. So, Mark, why don't you, one, tell everybody what your name is, and then two, give me a cultural and historical lesson on the alcohol we are about to drink.
Sure. What's up, everybody? My name's Mark J. I was born Mark Jovanovich. Spent a couple years in Nashville where I was known as Mark Johansson. So these days I just go by Mark J. So I'm of Serbian descent. And Kelly, thank you so much for having me on your show. Really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And this came about because you, I think you had a Facebook post saying you were learning Greek.
Yes, and I missed the opportunity to ask you, Kalispera, Mark, iste kala? You know, good evening, Mark. Are you well? That's about all
awesome.
I know. So
no, that's amazing. I mean,
but yes, you're right. That's how this came up.
Right. So, and I commented like, hey, I'm actually playing with a Greek bouzouki player this weekend. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, oh my God, that's awesome. Do you want to come on the show and talk about, Balkan music or whatever? Because I mentioned that connection. So I figured, when in Rome, do as Romans do. So if we're going to talk about Balkan stuff, we got to drink rakia. There's many different kinds of rakia. So I did a mail drop for you and gave you two. The one we're going to start with to start the show is called Medovina, which is plum brandy that's distilled with honey. It's nice and sweet, goes down easy. So I figured that'd be a great one to do as we get started here.
Okay. So I'm going to pour my little shot here. Is there like a, I used to have some like Serbian friends in high school who were, as many Serbs are, very proud of being Serbian. Is there a particular greeting, like the Greek opa, would like what would the Serbian equivalent be?
Absolutely. I think the most popular one is živeli. There's not a direct translation. It's like živeli is like to your health, to a good life. Okay. Živ means live and life, so živeli is our cheers of choice. So
all right, živeli. Well, virtually živeli right here. Ooh, here we go. Oh my God, that is delicious. That is so good.
Awesome. I'm glad you like it.
It doesn't have the sting of like I was expecting way more of like that turpentine sting. That was very warm, very fruity. Yeah. That was super good.
Of course I gave you one more, so we'll try that at the end of the show. Yes. We'll save that one for the end.
Perfect. Okay. Well, what a great introduction, Mark. Thank you again for being here, and thanks for putting up with all the technical difficulties. But yeah, you said it well. Breaking the fourth wall here to listeners of my show, this will be my 61st episode. So funny enough, this actually comes full circle with you, Mark, because you are local to me here in Pittsburgh, and we have met each other in person. I believe I met you at Howler's, actually, seeing like a stoner rock show, and then we've seen each other concurrently at a lot of other prog shows, which is what I said, hey, I need to switch it up. I need to talk to other musicians who don't just play in the genre that I like to listen to, because I think it makes me come across as like a subject matter expert, and that's not really the point of the show. I want to learn about what other musicians do, and that's why I brought you on today, because I'm going to get schooled on everything Balkan music today. So I know you're a guitarist, and we have met in person, and we do have similar music tastes, but that's probably about where our similarities end. So what is kind of your musical history? How did you grow up? Did you grow up in this musical culture? Or did you come to it later in life?
Yeah, good question. So, I come from a musical family. On my dad's side, my dad is like 100% Eastern European. Eastern European folk music, music is such a huge part of that culture. It permeates everything. So I started at a very young age. Eastern Europeans have this song and dance genre, or song and dance groups called Tamburitzans. They start when they're really young, like 5-6 years old. They go all the way up. Like Duquesne University, where I went to school, has a pretty well-known Tamburitzan group, and they've toured the world in past decades. They have their own tour bus. Literally, they set up their own show. Like they tour the country like rock stars, and party in hotel rooms. So, that was always a part of the culture. My dad to this day is a performing Eastern European musician. Like my dad literally gigs more than I do to this day. So I definitely have to thank my dad for that, for sure. But it's beyond Tamburitzans. They have like these wedding bands, right? And they play, but they don't just play weddings. They play folk fests, holidays, graduation parties, lamb roasts, basically any church event or social event. That's all part of that culture, right? So again, I started very young. I did start Tamburitzans when I was like 5 or 6, and right off the bat, they teach you the fundamentals of playing stringed instruments.
So that's not just the dancing, that's the ensemble that's behind the dancing as well, too?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, at 5 or 6 years old, I picked up my first stringed instrument. They teach you how to read music. They teach you how to hold a pick and fret the notes. So all those fundamentals got put in place really early. So that was kind of my start. I remember early on as a young kid, I couldn't, this instrument called a preem, it has no sustain. Like you pluck a note and then it just dies.
Oh, okay.
So if you're playing like half notes or whole notes, you have to do what's called tremolo picking. And I remember as a 5 or 6 year old, I couldn't do it.
Crazy fast. Yeah.
I couldn't do it at all. And after a couple weeks, I quit. I was like, you know what? Practice is on Monday nights. Monday Night Raw is on. I'm a 10-year-old kid. I'm trying to watch wrestling, so enough of this tremolo picking. I quit. Little did I know that later on that, of course, tremolo picking that's the right-hand fundamental of what is, of course, guitar shredding that, I fell in love with as a teenager. So, that was my, the start of it all.
So you were a trained folk musician in the Eastern European style long before you were a shred guitar fan.
Right, exactly. Like I said, I was like 5 or 6 and I quit like pretty soon. So a lot of kids stay in Tamburitzans all through high school graduation. And I kind of didn't go the Tammy route. By the time I was a teenager, I started really getting into rock and metal. And I started picking up a guitar on my own accord because my dad had one. Mm-hmm. But I didn't keep up with the Tamburitzan thing into high school and college. I went to Duquesne, I befriended all those Tamburitzans, but I was doing sort of the more quote American route, as they would say, like doing metal and that kind of stuff.
I know, like I said earlier, I had some friends that were Serbian. I believe they were Serbian in high school, and yeah, they're really into their own heritage and their culture. But then when I worked in catering for a bit, we catered an Armenian wedding, and those people fucking know how to party. It was crazy. But it's like, I hate to lump all these different cultures and countries into one area because that's totally not fair to them. They're all diverse and beautiful in their own way. But I do get the sense there's a lot of shared interspersing traditions between the countries of the Balkans, like Macedonia, Albania, Bulgaria, Greece, all that stuff. So were the instruments you were playing in the Tamburitzan stuff, those are real similar to the bouzouki, right? They're like a lute-based thing?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. absolutely.
Okay.
And those Tamburitzan groups, I mean, when they perform, it's not like it's usually not a 100% Serbian or 100% Macedonian show. Like they'll do a song and dance from Serbia, from Croatia, from Macedonia, from Bulgaria and Greece, and even Russia. Like it really is like sort of a pan-Slavic or Balkan kind of a thing most of the time. Of course, each country has their own spin on it and maybe their own instrument or way of doing things. But a lot of those groups, they cross borders pretty freely with that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I'm just thinking about how, like, we associate a lot of different cultures with, it's just music is just integral to their religion, their philosophy almost, their way of life. I mean, you would say that's true with your own culture as well?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I mean, like I said, it's at every event. And you mentioned religion. I know, the Orthodox Church plays such a big role in some of that stuff. I mean, that's what I was raised in. And the Greeks and the Serbs, that's why they get along together so well. And, that's why I was playing with the Greek bouzouki player that day. And because we've played Greek-Serb weddings where, like, the bride and the groom, one of them's Greek, one of them's Serb. So, yeah, it made sense to join those Greek and Serb musicians and make one big band and just have a giant party and drink ouzo and shlivo the whole time.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Well, one thing I did find really interesting when you sent me your little write-up was, granted, I know we've only met a handful of times, and it's not like we've talked in depth a lot, but you used to play in the Nashville scene. Like, what part of your life were you in there, and how did you get involved in that?
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mentioned I was into metal as a teenager and all that, and I started getting into prog metal, right? Really into Dream Theater, and that's when I learned about that music school was a thing, right? So I want to go to music school. I want to go to music school. Well, where I went, you had to study jazz or classical. So I actually studied jazz for 4 years, and the whole time I'm in school, all these people are saying, "Hey, if you want to be a professional musician, move to Nashville. If you want to be a pro musician, move to Nashville. That's where the work is." And I was like, "Okay, but I don't listen to country. I don't know country." So eventually I got out of school. I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? I want to move somewhere. And, Nashville was kind of there. And I started dating this girl who was into country. And I went to my first country show. It was Brad Paisley, who turns out is this amazing guitar player.
Yes.
Yeah. And it all just kind of clicked. And like my best friend at the time, my best friend, Anthony Rankin, went down there to do some work. And he said, "Hey, I think I want to move to Nashville." And I said, "You know what? I think I want to move down there with you." So we all went. My girlfriend went with us. The three of us went down to Nashville, and I kind of went for it. Found a gig on Craigslist eventually, and spent a year on the road playing country music. Around the country. Pretty much toward the southern U.S. His name's Daryl Perry. You should check him out. And I even got to record a full-length album on Music Row as his guitar player.
What?
Yeah, the album is called Memoirs from the Road. To this day, it's still my only professional production, album credit to this day, but, one's better than none.
Yeah.
So, I did that for a year, got to headline some cool festivals and, opened for a lot of national artists and did that. And, it ultimately didn't work out. And I ended up moving back home to Pittsburgh, which is where I am to this day. But that was such a huge experience for me. And even after I came home, I mean, it was country for so many years from, learning how to play and getting so much experience on it. So
what would you say you had to train yourself to do differently to adapt to a genre that you weren't really working in? I mean, that's got to be dropping you into a way different zone than you're used to.
Right. Well, thankfully at that point I'd already done it once before. Cause like I said, I was into metal. And then when I went to music school, I had to learn jazz, which was totally something I didn't really know. So learning jazz was this total years-long experience. So when I got to Nashville, I was like, well, now you got to learn country. I already knew all the harmonic theory, but what I learned was physically, it was a totally my right hand. You have to pick notes with different fingers, and there's these different left hand techniques. So I just had to do a deep dive of all the greats and try and find some instructionals and take some time. And so, but you know what? It's become part of my identity, honestly, because I started with metal. I went to jazz. I got this background in Eastern European music, and then I just added country to the list. And it was just kind of, I just ran with it, of becoming this jack of all trades of, throwing taking whatever's thrown at me.
This is actually something I was just talking with my boyfriend about the other day. We were saying how I think like a big reason I started the show was to touch at the point that music really is a universal language, and you can really pluck anyone out of any culture and ask them what their favorite music is or what their favorite singers are and stuff, and they'll have an answer for you. But would you agree that knowing all these different styles and stuff like allows you to kind of tap into a certain style or a certain genre, like when your life demands it? Like, do you find yourself going, oh, you know, I'm gonna stick on country gigs today because, you know, that fulfills a need for me? Or is it just like, I just don't like to be bored, I'm gonna play all these different genres? That's a really long-winded question, I'm sorry, but
no, that's all right. Well, you know, I definitely appreciate the challenge. I definitely appreciate the, you know, like I've done a lot of musical gigs from all this, you know, and which is its own thing because you got to be able to sight read, and guitar players are notoriously bad sight readers. And of course you're playing show tunes at that point. So I always like the challenge of just picking up the phone and, all right, who's on the other end of this line, and are they going to want country? Are they going to want show tunes? Are they going to want metal? Like, you never know. That's part of the excitement for me that I really appreciate. I don't think I wake up in the morning. Well, I mean, I wake up in the morning and every day and say, I want to be in a prog band. That's like my ultimate dream, you know, and goal. Like, man, I just want to be in like a prog metal band. But like, I keep doing all these things that aren't prog metal, you know, whether it's Eastern Euro or, you know, country or jazz or what, you know. So it basically, there's definitely an element of, you know, whoever's calling me and offering me a gig, you know, but that's part of the fun and part of the challenge of trying to be nimble like that.
Oh. Well, speaking of that, I know the other day when we were hashing out details, you sent me that video on your Instagram of you playing, you know, on your obviously very modern electric guitar, playing like your instrumental prog version of like a Macedonian folk tunes. I think you could go that route. That is a very untapped market. But how did you combine both of those things? Like, what sensibilities do you have to make that work?
Well, so, you know, the first thing I think of when you ask that question is when I first got into metal as a young teenager, right? There'd be these passages, whether it was Metallica or Pantera, or later on Racer X and Dream Theater. They'd start, whenever it'd get really intense, something would click in my brain, go, I've heard this before. Oh. And like, this sounds like the music I grew up on. Like, obviously there's distorted guitars and drums, but like, no, there's something about this is the same. And it's a particular mode, not to get music nerd on you, but like, you know, it's the Phrygian dominant mode, like the harmonic minor scale. And it's like, they're all using that same scale, essentially. You know, that mode goes by many names. Some call it the gypsy scale, some call it the Jewish scale, some call it the Spanish scale. Like, it comes in all these different, you know, musics around the world. So, and it's in metal too, you know, Paul Gilbert's a master of it, John Petrucci, like all these great guitar players, you know, Jeff Loomis, they all use it. So it's been years that I've been hearing that, and it's been in the very back of my mind, like, man, whenever I get some time, I want to try and arrange some of this Eastern European stuff, because I know, like, if you put metal instrumentation on it, it would slay.
And it did. It was so cool. I listened to it like 7 times. I'm like, I need a whole album of this. I really do.
Yeah, so I just posted that last week, and I would love to start posting some more stuff like that. You know, I have some plans on a couple more I want to post, but some of them are really challenging. So, you know, I got to shed it out to make sure it's nice and clean before I post it. So
well, your fingers were flying. It actually just made me think of I think the last concert I saw you in person at was Thank You Scientist at the Thunderbird pre-pandemic, and you know what your video made me think of is that little lead into Psychopomp with that kind of pentatonic sounding little tabla and the weird shit Tom's doing on his guitar, and I was like, oh, that's what that sounds like. It was just, it's so novel to our Western ears, because we're still not used to hearing, well, I'll have to let you explain, but I mean, there's obviously, to like an untrained music theory ear, anybody can tell when you hear a Greek folk musician playing or an Eastern European folk musician, you're like, oh, there's something different here. Right. But unless you know music theory and stuff, you might not be able to put your finger on what it is. So I'm like totally here for smushing the two together, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that show too, because I definitely remember that night, and I remember seeing you. It was like, because I remember, oh man, it's Kelly. She was at at the Great Walker Show at Howlers, and I remember in so many words, I was kind of like, hey, I don't know anyone here. Do you mind if I follow you around for a couple hours? And you were very gracious enough to not shoo me away and say, no, get out of here. So thank you so much. That was so kind of you.
No.
Because you mentioned Psychopomp. The one I thought of, which I didn't know at the time, was Blood on the Radio. Because when that song started, it was like, I didn't know this song. I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And I remember you got really into it. I was like, wait, and I asked you, what song is this? What song is this? You're like, Blood on the Radio. It was like, so. Yeah,
oh man,
that was a good memory.
Who thought we'd be talking about that? But as I've been teaching myself Greek and immersing myself more in Greek culture, I found the musical traditions very fascinating too. Because tell me if I'm wrong, but are the instruments you're playing in your Eastern European folk band similar to Greek in that, I think they use quarter tones? They typically have a lot more strings on their instruments. That's what kind of lends it to that, non-Western sound. It's very different.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on the artist. Okay. The band, the Eastern European band I play with, which by the way is called Četiri Jedan Dva.
I was waiting for you to say it, not me.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, Četiri Jedan Dva, which is Serbian for 412, because we all grew up in the 412 and love Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. Our instrumentation is, drums, bass, guitar, and one guy plays keys and synth and an accordion, and we have another accordion, and then another guy does vocals and violin. So, except for the accordion, very Western instruments, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, in the States, we all know of accordion. We might not listen to it, but of course we know about it. Right. When we play with Sotiri, the Greek bouzouki player, he's the bouzouki player. So obviously he's bringing that bouzouki element into it. The bouzouki, it's 8 strings, but they're all double tuned. They're all double strung, so it's 4-toned. Okay. I don't think it's tuned with quarter tones, like those little, which you hear a lot in Middle Eastern music of different tunings and all these little in between notes that we don't associate with Western 12-tone harmony. Right. I don't think his bouzouki is tuned that way. Maybe some are. I don't know.
I actually just wanted to hop in here and include a little clip of Sotiri himself playing bouzouki, just so that listeners understand what we're talking about when we refer to this sound.
I'm not a bouzouki expert, to be honest with you, but right. I don't know if they answered the question. I got a little lost
that's
there,
fine. I figured there had to be some overlap between kind of what you're doing and what he's doing. But I was curious though how you got wrapped up with Sotiri and how everything worked out. Because like you said, you're like, hey, I'm not Greek, but I ended up playing with this Greek guy because of the overlap. Right. How did you get that gig? And what are some of your favorite experiences playing with him and his band?
Right. Oh, man. Well, I don't think I'll be able to share all those on these podcasts. But,
this is not a family-friendly podcast in case you need to share things that are not family-friendly.
Well, just lots of this, lots of booze, just lots of booze, lots of spirits. No. Well, to take one step further back from there, let me explain how I got hooked up with Četiri Jedan Dva. So I mentioned those wedding bands, right? Those Eastern Euro wedding bands. And the guys that were all in this band were in one that was I think the name translates to heroes. It's one word, which is Junaci. It's Junaci, Junaci. But for over a decade, they played all the Serbian weddings and Serbian fests and all this stuff. And eventually they had a kind of a falling out. And then when I came back from Nashville, they're like, hey, we're starting a new version of this, and we want to bring you into it and get your guitar experience and expertise and what I do to try and mesh with what they do. So that's how I got involved with them. And it's a very casual gig. We don't write original music, for better or for worse. Okay. We don't record albums. We play all those weddings and those social events. We've done a couple things on social media. We did play at the Funhouse at Mr. Small's once, but it's mostly they're mostly at Eastern European social halls. It's kind of like an underground.
You guys played at the Pierogi Fest at Kennywood, right?
Kennywood, yeah. Right.
That makes sense, though. Or you'd play at the Greek Food Festival here at Oakmont, or whatever.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff.
Exactly. Okay. But as I think I mentioned, so and all those guys, even though I wasn't in like Duquesne Tammys, literally the rest of them were all Duquesne University Tamburitzans. So that was their pedigree, like they just kept doing that. And I don't know if Sotiri was with Tamburitzans, but there was just so much, all those networks know each other so well that they've always known of each other. Sotiri would play at the Serbian club, and the guys from Četiri Jedan Dva would sit in with them. So they've known each other long before I did. And then it was only a matter of time after we got this new group together that, there was a Serbian guy and a Greek girl, and they're getting married, and hey, we want to have Greek music and Serbian music at the wedding, and be like, let's call. So we want to have Sotiri play at our wedding. Can he play with you guys? Like, absolutely. And we've done that like 3 or 4 times now. Like we played a wedding in DC and just got hammered. So cool. And that's, because drinking's part of the culture for better or worse, we're getting hammered during the gigs, and, it's maybe it sounds a little sloppy by the end, but we always have a good time. And he's so caught up and always has a good story to tell. And so definitely those are my favorite memories playing, is with those guys, just hanging out.
I watched a couple of his YouTube videos, just like trying to get a feel for everything before I talk to you. And I know you are not Sotiri, but, still, I'm like, yeah, that's what I associate Greek and Eastern European culture with. It's not just the golden age of philosophy and democracy and amazing statues. It's getting fucked up and drinking. But, like, I thought, surely he's going to have some crazy wild video, but it all seems fairly reserved. But I guess that's once they turn the camera off, the real fun starts.
Well, but that's part of the funny part of it too, is because like we do a lot of family events too, because it's like if it's folk fests, it's like in the daytime, or a pierogi fest at Kennywood, obviously not a 21 and over event, but like we also do Friday night gigs at a Serbian club or at the Bulgarian Macedonian club, and like you got to be 21 to get in because it's a drinking event, or sometimes there's a lot of drinking and there's still kids there, because there's a bar area that kids can't go to or whatever, and it's just chaos some of the times at some of these events, but. Yeah, the longer the gigs go, the booze starts flowing and, things get rowdy.
Well, I do always like to ask touring musicians, okay, what's your craziest horror story? Or like, your one standout memory that makes you go, yeah, this is why I do this. I don't know if you have an answer to both of those. But.
Oh, man. So I have one that the first thing that comes to my mind. I don't know if this ticks all the boxes, but it's definitely my favorite story. So I told you I got my gig from Craigslist. Financially independent country artist Daryl Perry, right? I auditioned for one group before them, and they're like, "Yeah, we go up and play North Dakota, and we travel in the back. We travel in our Chevy Trailblazer. You can sleep in the back of the Trailblazer all the way to North Dakota." I was like, "Yeah, I think I'll pass." So I auditioned for Daryl. He has me audition in his house, in his bedroom, no band, just me and him. And okay, this is getting a little weird. But then he shows me his touring vehicle, and it's just this van with a couch and a couple made-up bunks. And it's like, I'll take it. This is awesome. This is better than Trailblazer. Mm-hmm. So, okay, first gig. Show up at 5 a.m. We leave for an 11-day swing with a bunch of guys I've never met before. So I show up day one of the gig, 5 a.m., quit my job. Here we go. We're doing this. The bass player's there. The drummer shows up after me, half asleep, cigarette hanging out of his mouth. And he looks at me and goes, "It's a good gig, man. It's a good gig." So like, I don't know if he could tell I was nervous, but like he just looked at me and said, "It's a good gig," and like just got in the truck, van fell asleep. So yeah, he shows up. The fiddle player, it's 5:15, no fiddle player. 5:20, fiddle player. 5:30, fiddle player hasn't shown up, and the bassist says, "Yeah, I think he's battling some personal demons." So, but we're leaving for an 11-day swing. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do? And like, he's like, "Oh, Daryl probably just call someone." I was like, he's going to call someone at 5:30 in the morning on a Tuesday to leave town for 11 days. So Daryl calls this guy up and says, "Hey, we're leaving 11 days. You want to come out?" And this fiddle player out of the blue says, "I'll be ready in 20 minutes.
Holy shit. What?
So that's just the most Nashville story I've ever heard, right? Like, you call a guy literally at 5:30, 6 in the morning saying, "Hey," he's got a woman at home, like he's got a girlfriend, and he's like, how do you tell you, wake up, "Hey, I'm going to go on the road for 12 days. I'm leaving in 20 minutes. But that's exactly how that went. So not really a party story, but in terms of like, No,
but I love the takeaway from that though. It's like where there is a need, it will be filled. And I mean, I think there's this like crazy mythos we have about Nashville built up in our heads, and I guess you kind of get entered into this elite pantheon of musicians who have actually lived to tell the tale of working and being a musician in Nashville. So that's always fascinating to me, to talk to people who've actually, walked the walk, so to speak. Like, oh, yeah, I can tell you every bit of it is true. Like, what, not to keep focusing on Nashville, but I mean, what really makes Nashville, what is so special about it? I mean, obviously the market's there, but it seems like there's just this caliber of people that are there, that just, stuff happens in Nashville that wouldn't happen anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, the market, the industry's there. Just so much of the industry's there. And it's, I think it's not New York, obviously. It's not LA, obviously, right? Like New York and LA have their own culture. Mm-hmm. Nashville's a southern town, and of course, southern charm is a thing. So I think a lot of people down there are polite and willing to help each other out. I think it's not, in my experience, it wasn't so cutthroat. Like there's always someone trying to help you out, which was great. But of course, everyone goes there everyone knows why they're there, right? They're there to take a shot at a career, and they try to bring the heat. They do what they can, and I think it brings the best out of a lot of people. I mean, of course, I need to acknowledge that it didn't work out for me, right? I only spent 2 years there. I ran out of money, and I kind of came home and got married, which is great. And I'm very happy with all that. But, so it didn't totally work out for me. But, like, I know my buddy Anthony is still down there. He's playing with Gary Allan. He's doing great. He's really got tapped into the network. So, I mean, Nashville, it's a great place for sure.
Wow. Man, I used to listen to a lot of Gary Allan growing up.
Nice.
Nothing on but the radio. No.
There you go.
I have to ask, I know you said when you went to Nashville you went with your girlfriend. Is that girlfriend now your wife, or is it different?
Yes, we stayed together.
Oh, good. Love story.
Yeah,
okay.
She moved down there with me. When I got my road gig, she actually moved home, and we did long distance, which that was definitely part of the reason. When I ran out of money, I was like, you know what? I kind of had to make a choice there, and I chose to come home, and we stayed together, and of course, happily ever after. We're married to this day, and
Wow.
So we're going that route.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I know your wife isn't a professional musician based on what I know, but I mean, she seems, I've tried to explain this to partners of mine too. I'm like, when you're dating a musician, you have to understand that there is something that calls us to this performance, and it consumes us at sometimes. You can't take it personally. You can't unless it's so extreme, you can't take it personally to the degree that you think I'm choosing music over you. It's just like this thing you have to chase, and I think you probably get that if you moved to Nashville for 2 years and came back.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's been with me long enough that like she was with me at the outset of this whole dream, so we were pretty honest with each other, and she's been at my side this whole time and hasn't really given me too much at all about chasing these dreams and moving to Nashville and going on 2-week-long trips and, being gone a lot of weekends and, which kind of leads us almost to the pandemic, where maybe over the pandemic I've maybe changed some things up and, maybe I don't need to be gone every weekend, chasing these dreams or whatever. If I'm playing a cover gig in, a flyover state or whatever, maybe I can try and readjust my values. But yeah, she's been with me the whole time. It's been great.
Way to go, Mark's wife. Good job. Well, let's talk about those dreams, because again, I know a lot about what you do and kind of where you come from now, but what does your future look like as Mark J, the musician?
Right. Well, so I would, as I mentioned earlier, I would love to join or form a prog band. I'm also trying to be realistic and redefine success. I know one of our mutual friends, Sykes, Brian Howe,
yep.
And he always, one theme I hear about him talk about on his show is like maybe redefining success in a way. Mm-hmm. And I think he's spot on about that. I'm like, let's just be real. I'm already 35. I'm not doing music full time as much as I want to be. I have done music full time at parts of my life. I'd love to get back there again, but I do have a wife to take care of and a house and a car. So, so a goal would be to figure out a way to get back to doing music full time and be in a prog band. But if all those things can't pan out, I know I'm going to need to write and record. I don't know if you've noticed, we haven't really talked about writing music at all in our conversation.
No, let's go there. I usually ask about it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's never been a forte of mine. And I know that's like what makes musicians great is they write their own stuff and they get in original bands. It's something I've always struggled with. And same. I think, with being a jack of all trades, I enjoy learning a new style of music and practicing, that's something I've always struggled with because there's so much good music out there. I'm always trying to learn new music. Mm-hmm. But whenever I try and write something else, it's like I'm always, there's that writer's block and, which is just an excuse, right? Everyone has to deal with that. But yeah. So I would like to try and focus a bit more on writing and recording more. But in the meantime, I've started uploading guitar content to social media like Instagram. You mentioned the Instagram video. I have some other videos of just some playing, trying to build an audience, trying to be, visible on social media. So if I can somehow work that into joining a band that I can, put my little spice into and maybe help with the writing process, but have a really strong writing partner, I would love to. That's definitely where I would love to go as we come out of the pandemic.
I'm sure. Like already thinking of someone I could connect you to as you speak that might fit that. But I get that struggle though for sure, because finally making good on my promise to try to join a band and getting a lineup together in the past year, that has been hard. But like, I don't know if you feel the same way. I think the way people look at musicianship as a measure of success is, like you said, if you write your own original music. There's always this weird filter that people see musicians through where, like, they're less talented or less good if they just play other people's stuff. And right. I'm sure since you are gigging with, like you said, in the Eastern European band, you're not writing original stuff. You're just playing folk tunes that people already know, that are ingrained in their culture and their upbringing. Do you ever feel like you have to battle that? Like, oh, I'm not, as much of a musician because I'm not writing it on my own.
Only internally, like never with anyone else. I mean, and like, for many years, I did do a good job of being a hired gun for an original artist. So that I think is a really good lane for me, I mean, man, whether it was Daryl or when even when I came back, there was some folks I played for Christian Beckman. I even mentioned Gabby Barrett. I've played with Gabby Barrett from American Idol. Oh, I can't believe I haven't mentioned that yet. But yeah, great. So Gabby Barrett, American Idol, hugely successful right now. I'm not in her band anymore, but even post American Idol, I got to be a musical director for a couple shows. So wow. It's always, I always try to find original artists. So I would like to get back to doing that to play for. So even if I'm not a contributing writing partner, I can still contribute somewhere. Like, I know you're an Opeth fan. I liken it to Opeth, and Michael Okerfeldt, of course, is the main songwriter, but you also got Frederick Okasan holding it down on lead guitar. And even though Michael might be that main writer, Frederick definitely brings a lot to the table there.
Very much. I saw you have an Opeth flag on your wall. I have 2 Opeth posters off camera here, but yeah, that's a very good way to put it. It's like, I think trying to be diplomatic in any musical ensemble is it can be hard, because some people are very hard-headed about their own ideas and they don't want to sacrifice any of their composition for the sake of like unity in a group, and
right.
It's very, very difficult to handle. But okay, I'm glad you mentioned that about kind of where you're going with your career, because I know the track you sent me to that was Temple of Passion. Mm-hmm. That was just an original you wrote, right? That's kind of like the direction you'd like to head?
Yeah, so that track is actually it's about 10 years old at this point.
Really?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound dated, so that's a good thing.
Oh, thank you. Well, so like, and that's the problem, right? Because I've spent all my time playing for other artists and this and that, the other thing, that like, that track I actually recorded before I got my first gig in Nashville. And it was like, I needed to make a professional website and get my shit and gear. So it was like, let me record some demos of what I'm capable of. Mm-hmm. And so I almost call that like a demo track. It's just 2 minutes, right? Instrumental, not a ton. It's very short to the point. And so, yeah, that's how that track came about. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought.
No, that's good. No, I'm putting all the pieces together here. Like, I honestly, as a guest on my show and as a person that I would consider, someone I'd like to get to know more, and as a friend, it's like, of course, I want to support all those things you're doing. I definitely see some kind of crazy track with you got to do that Macedonian folk prog thing. I'm here for it. Honestly.
Well, and again, like in a lot of those prog bands, that stuff's in there, man. Whether for the last couple decades, I mean, you can find sprinkles of it probably in some Rush songs even, and all the way up to the modern stuff with whether it's Bumblefoot, Dream Theater, Buckethead. I mean, all those guys all love that stuff. So there's definitely a lane for sure.
Have you ever listened to Distorted Harmony by chance?
I have not heard of Distorted Harmony.
Oh man, okay, that's your homework.
I'll have to write that one down.
Yeah, they're a band from Israel. They're very Dream Theater-y, but less wanky. Like you take James LaBrie out of the equation.
Sure.
But they totally use that Phrygian mode. It's very. I know this is probably not politically correct to say, but in the music world, they still call it Oriental. It's just great. It's just such well-composed progressive metal. It's fantastic, but it definitely has that Eastern flair, and I love it. So
yeah, that's awesome.
I could see you going that route, but
I wrote it down. I will definitely add it to my queue.
Perfect. Okay. So I looked at your little list of influences now that we're talking back about prog
Sure.
and where you want to go. There are a couple bands on here that I have never heard of, and I'm sure you're going, oh, of course, they're the probably Serbian ones. You mentioned, I'm not even going to try to pronounce these. Halid Basilik Sasamati.
Halid Beshlic, yeah.
Please take over. Who are these musicians?
Right. Well, because, I didn't want to pull a bait and switch on you, right? Because I knew the premise of our conversation was, Balkan music and, the Greek stuff. So,
yeah.
But that's definitely a part of what I do. But, it's only a part of what I do, right? So, I didn't know how much you wanted to focus on the Balkan thing. So I was like, well, if I need to name Balkan artists, the ones that Četiri Jedan Dva definitely cop are Halid Beshlic and, a couple of other videos I've planned is from some Serbian fiddle player named Aleksandar Šišić, which may be on the list you're looking at. I'm not sure. Yep. But so that's stay tuned for that because that's some of the videos I have planned that I want to try and put on Instagram, but the stuff he plays on fiddle is insane. And, I don't want to upload Slop City to Instagram, so I just got to keep practicing.
So you're doing guitar interpretations of violin music, basically.
Right. Well, yeah. That's kind of what that Macedonian one that you saw, Pajdushko. That's basically what that was. Because the guitar in all these music. I mean, if there even is guitar, it's usually just playing rhythm guitar, upbeats, just playing the chords, and it's usually accordion and violin and clarinet and instruments like that are doing all the shredding.
They're taking the melody role as opposed to in rock and metal where it's usually the guitar.
Right.
That makes sense. That's what I couldn't put my finger on because I was listening to some what's his name? I think it's Michaelis Tsourekis something. I should have looked it up before I said all that, but he's also a Greek bouzouki player, and I was just listening to it's probably a real Greek would be oh yeah, that's just elevator music to us, but to me, a person looking at the culture with new eyes, I'm like, this is great. This exemplifies everything that sounds Greek to me, and it's so musical and fun and upbeat, but I couldn't put my finger on why it sounds different. And you hit the nail on the head. It's the fact that the guitar is kind of in the background doing nothing, and it's these kind of mandolin type instruments that are up front really playing all this crazy shit.
Right, but to your point earlier, just I think that's where that opportunity is because I've spent so many years playing different kinds of music and developing my ear with that stuff that I've had to learn how to transcribe solos and stuff. So whenever I hear clarinets and violins doing all that, a lot of that stuff translates pretty easily guitar, and hey, put a 7-string guitar and some double kick behind it and we're off to the races,
Nice.
And it takes some of the pressure off to try and write something original, which I think maybe to answer an earlier question, yeah, I do struggle with that internally of because I know some people are if you're not writing original music, why are you even bothering? And it's I don't know, it's so much easier to me to maybe adapt different stuff and maybe apply it. But kudos to anyone who's original. I mean, obviously if you're writing original music, you've done more than I feel like I can, and I have so much respect for everyone just blazing new trails, and I take inspiration from that, and I try to keep up. But Yeah.
I think it is especially difficult in the world we live in too, where we are so globally connected and we're so connected through social media, to really find like a truly novel thing, because it's the exposure principle. You know, you think you've come up with something new, and then there's like 40 other people that have done it last week, and you see it because you see it on Facebook or something, and then you kind of subconsciously get affected by it because it's just trend setting. And like, I almost kind of respect people that just keep it how it was in a way. It's like they know what they want, they know what they like, and they're not trying, like, there's a virtue in not trying to reinvent the wheel, I think.
Well, I mean, like, you know, what I struggle with is there's this fine line between, like, and I've heard people say this, you know, like you're not going to be heavier than Meshuggah. We already have Meshuggah, you know? So, you know, we already have you know, these super guitar players. Like, I'm not going to be able to outplay these guys. So, like, there's you got to sort of find your lane of, like, well, if you know, so how do you find that original thing when it's like, when, you know, I don't know. So that's kind of where I try to find, and it's tough to beat that inner critic for sure. But, you know, I know you just got to keep your nose to the grindstone and keep trying until something works, I guess, you know.
Right. That does touch on some of my questions I like to ask towards the, we're not at the total end yet, but I mean, winding down. What is kind of your philosophy on why music is so important to you, and what drives you to create it?
Wow. I don't know. It's always been there, you know. I just love doing it. I don't know. I don't know how else to put it, really. I love picking up an instrument. I love playing. I love the sound, you know, when it all fits, and, you know, for me, you know, we're talking recently about all my struggles with writing and how it's not like, you know, I'm all about the live gig. You know, ever since before I was playing an instrument, you know, all those social events I told you about where there was a band, ask any of my parents' generation, you could always find me sitting right next to the stage. Like, it was like my spot. I was right next to the stage, watching the instrumentalists, watching the gear, like, you know, the mixing boards, and what are all these buttons? Like, I've just literally, as far back as I can remember, I've always been obsessed with it. And I just love it, you know? And so as an adult, you know, I'm always searching that high of that next gig, you know, when the band sounds killer and there's an audience having a great time, and, you know, just really getting into the zone. I mean, that's what I crave for. That's me chasing the dragon right there, is that next live gig. And, you know, doesn't matter if it's Eastern European, doesn't matter if it's metal, doesn't matter if it's country, you know, it's fine if it's jazz too. I don't really play a lot of jazz, but I mean, you know, it's all that same adrenaline of that intense feeling. I don't know if I answered the first part of your question.
No, that's perfect. That kind of leads me to want to ask you this next question, but I think I already know the answer. I mean, how tough has the pandemic been for you? Because it's really the live gig that you feel most fulfilled.
Well, exactly. Right. Yeah, of course it's been tough. You know, of course, it's been tough on everyone. You know, in fact, I was on the brink of getting a band off the ground right when the pandemic hit. Found a great female singer, female lead, found a great keyboard player who liked writing, all those things I mentioned, and we were in the writing phase. We started recording. We were producing an EP, and, you know, one thing led to another during the pandemic, and it just kind of fell apart. And you and I were talking, you know, earlier, like, should we do this in person? And I was like, well, my wife works with unvaccinated, unmasked children, so I know she's worried about their, you know, job going under. So there's all those kind of life worries. So I got to protect her, you know, best interest. So I'm kind of like avoiding a lot of social events. I know, like I know Black Dahlia Murder and After the Burial were just in town. I wanted to go to that show, but it's an indoor show, and you know what? For the sake of, I'll hang back. So, and you know, when you're trying to form a band and they're all ready to get going, and now if I'm like, you know, kind of keeping distance still, it's like, you know, so yeah, it's been tough for sure. But I played a couple of outdoor events. Obviously, we did Pierogi Fest, and outdoor events have been happening. So, you know, it's definitely on the upswing. We'll get there. It's just that's why I come back to just recording content in my basement here, and, you know, maybe trying to get back into writing a bit, and hopefully sometime next year I'll find something or create something that can getting some momentum,
Yeah. Well, hey.
What about for you? Because I know you've been starting a band.
Yeah, we actually just brought on a singer. I actually needed to do that before this recording. I needed to listen to a thing she sent. I hope I'm not jinxing anything by saying this on air, but yeah, I mean, we officially now have a full lineup, so it's just a matter of figuring out what we're going to do next, and I can feel your struggle. Writing music is very difficult. It's something I never thought I'd be doing, and then when I had to understand that there is really no right way to do it, that's when you kind of allow your barriers to come down and go, okay, I'm just going to do the best I can with the best I have. Like, make what I can happen, and quit trying to force yourself into greatness. It'll come in time if you, like, whack away at it. Rome wasn't built in a day. So, yeah, it's been a fun process, and we're just trying to figure out where to go from here. But, yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that you were starting to get something off the ground, too, and then it's just like the pandemic has ruined everything.
Again, it's been hard on all of us, but I'm glad what you mentioned there, because I think I failed to mention that earlier, like where I was saying, we already have the heaviest of the heavy, we already have the fastest of the fastest. So it's like, that's where I struggle with, is like, we also have to be realistic, right? And like, we are where we're at, and like, but I think people do appreciate sharing where you're at, and I think that's what I need to be more honest. So I mean, I feel like I could take definitely some advice from you on that, of just like, hey, this is where we're at, and we're gonna share where we're at and go from here, and that's.
Well, I mean, if you're asking me, the only advice I can share to anyone really listening, trying to do it, is like, one thing we have found as a band that's been shocking to me is, they always say honesty is the best policy. Well, sometimes we've lost potential people because we were honest. Like, we formed less than a year ago. All of us are musicians who have been hobbyist musicians for quite some time, most of our lives, most of us, but none of us have ever played in a band. And so we're putting ads and stuff out there going, hey, looking for a singer who kind of sounds like this, and we're trying to write this type of music. None of us have played live. We're all pretty green. We're all new to writing. So we're being, like, super honest. We're not advertising ourselves as something we aren't, like, oh yeah, we've toured, we're gig ready. None of that. Like, this is a learn as we go project, and you'd be really amazed at, one, how many people don't read, two, how many people seem to almost get upset at you when they're like, well, we had this one guy, if you're fucking listening, Jared, eat a dick, but, like, this guy was like, hounding us for, what, do you guys have any demos? Are you just a garage band? I've played in 4 bands, and we're like, that's great, dude, but we're not looking for that.
Right.
We're not there yet, You clearly didn't comprehend what we've been saying, so it's like, good. I hope he's out somewhere being a superstar, singer with a band right now. Good. Oh, wish you the best. But it just shows me, like, sometimes people, they just bite off more than they can chew, and it's like, the older I get, I'm realizing that there is no shortcut to hard work. You just have to learn how to do things with other people. You have to learn how to collaborate. You have to learn how to communicate differently. Yeah,
and I'm probably like coming from the other angle of that, but having the same issue, like, where I might see an opportunity and go, oh, I'm not going to do that, or that's not the right fit, or that's not going to gel, and it's like, dude, maybe I should just take down some barriers and just like give things a shot.
I think the best approach we've had so far is we've had people show up for like one rehearsal, and then they think about it, give them a couple days, and then they just send us a polite message, a couple days later. Hey guys, thank you so much for your time. I don't think this is going to be a good fit. And it's perfect. Right. It's like, good, we didn't waste your time, you didn't waste ours. That's all you can ask of anyone, I think.
Right. Hey, so I did want to mention, because we've been Facebook friends for, pre-pandemic here. Mm-hmm. And I remember how excited you were, and you started playing drums, and you immediately started uploading playthrough videos.
Yeah, that were terrible.
No, well, you posted one a couple weeks ago, and I watched it, and I was like, holy shit, dude. Like, that was like, you've only been playing for like a year and a half, and like the most recent one you posted, like, it sounded so good. I was so impressed.
Oh,
like,
thank
man,
you.
You've been playing for like a year and a half. It's like the improvement was so good. Like, I was very impressed.
I will take the compliment, but I will say I have been playing drums for longer than a year and a half, so I have to check myself there.
I'm sorry.
But I mean, hey, I'll take the compliment. Thank you. You're my guest. I should be giving you all the praise right now. But no, I love that we can have this conversation. And yeah, thank you. It takes a lot. I think just like in what you're doing, it takes a lot to be authentic, to play the music you want to play. And obviously, no one outside of the little underground scene, like you said, is lining up to go see Serbian folk music. So you have to like really love it to want to do it and improve and continue to do it just for the love of the art. That demands a whole nother level of respect to me.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, I'm all about the live gig, and I'm just searching that high. And even though the 412 gigs are some of the most, maybe some, on the lower key end, those guys are so genuine, and they always have a good story to tell. And, those are some of the most fun gigs I play for sure. And I haven't really told them this, but I also get a lot of ideas from them, right? Because like I've learned so much repertoire from playing with them that it's like, okay, and now I have charts because they have all the charts, and like so there's definitely, I get a lot out of that gig for sure, of hanging with them and playing with them.
This is more of a technical question, but I'm only vaguely familiar with like, the Nashville style, where isn't that like its whole kind of brand of gig charting and like instant quick shorthand for knowing what to play, right?
Yeah, Nashville numbers it's called. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was interesting to learn when I moved down there. And the first time you see it, it's like, what is this? But I mean, anyone, if anyone who's, done some musical training and has been lucky enough to learn Roman numerals, it's basically Roman numerals just written out in numbers. But it's interesting. But it's not just the chords. It's like there's all these little markings for like hits and over the bar stuff, and it can get pretty complex. It's interesting.
Wow. But do you have to use a similar style when you're playing your Eastern European stuff? Is it a similar legend?
Well, so what's funny about that is they just do lyric charts and they write the chords above the words. But they write the chord above where it's going to be when its changes. And, a lot of Eastern European music, it's like not in 4/4. It might be in 7/8 or 9/8 or 11/8 or 11/16, and so you're trying to like read lyrics in another language that you don't know, and then is the chord there's the chord there, so that's part of the fun.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah.
Every single thing you're telling me is just by its own accord convincing me, yes, you are destined to create Macedonian prog band, like it's gonna happen. Especially when you said they have all the weird time signatures. I did notice that listening to a lot of bouzouki music. I was like, is this prog? It's very creative. Yeah. It's very non-conventional.
And that's why it made so much sense, and why like all dovetailed together. Like, like I didn't realize it, but I've been listening to those elements that whole time. So once I learned that's what those bands were doing, it was like, yes, more of this, please.
Yes, perfect. Well, Mark, I have a couple more questions for you before my very last one. But
sure.
Oh, before I forget, I'm sure I'll have this episode out by then, but you are playing a gig at the Bulgarian Macedonian National Education and Cultural Center soon. So tell me about that gig.
Oh man, they pushed it back because of the pandemic.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. No, you're right. When I filled it, we talked before about upcoming events, and since we had that discussion, they did push that back again. Okay, yeah, because basically what happened was the Vlado, Bulgarian accordion player, phenomenal. He has kids that aren't vaccinated, so he was like, hey, this is an indoor gig, so I'm going to sit this one out. And I was like, well, Vlado's our Bulgarian guy, and it's at the Bulgarian club, so we can't do this without Vlado. So.
Yeah. Oh. Well, hey, if I've learned anything tonight, it's that Eastern European fathers are like the best in the world. They're looking out for their wife and their kids. Okay. Well, hey,
sorry about that.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah. So I actually, so for upcoming gigs, that was kind of the big one I had coming up. So
I'm looking forward to the first episode where I can get a good answer on that one and go, hey, what's coming up, and not, everything got pushed back or it's getting
sorry to disappoint.
That's okay. Okay. Well, hey, I'll ask you a few more things here. I have stolen this question from another local podcaster, Bill Domiano. He always likes to ask his guests, if you had a chance to sit down with any artist, alive or dead, and ask them a few questions, who would you choose and what would you ask them?
Oh, man.
I love that question.
I definitely should have done my homework on that one, eh? Any artist, live or dead. Well, that's a tough one, man. you know, gun to my head, I'm seeing Dimebag in my head all of a sudden, you know. You know, it's, you know, I've always liked Pantera. Dimebag was always such an interesting figure to me. I've seen all those Pantera home videos, you know, loved watching them, and he just seemed like such a genuine dude. And, you know, he was an untrained player, but he was like the best in the business, and he was just always so nice to everyone, and they would party with everyone, and, you know, no judgment on there, you know, that you could always tell they were just cool, down to hang with everyone. So I think it would be, you know, I don't know if I'd be, if I could hang with him as much as I drink at these Serbian gigs, you know, those black tooth grins go down quick, but yeah, that's I'll go with Dimebag because, you know, he's the GOAT, right? Dimebag's the GOAT.
Not a fan of Pantera's music, to be totally honest, but I always got that same feeling from him. And of course, that's just extra tragic that, of course, some, you know, dude decided to shoot him. I mean, I saw Ginger actually live at the same venue that Dimebag was killed at, and that was a very strange feeling. You know, it just felt like, you know, who knows, like maybe he had inspired the musicians who are standing here right now, and this is where he died. Like, it was a weird sensation, but nothing but respect for the guy.
What about you?
Oh God, I love that you're asking me all the same questions. I can't sit in the hot seat and not take it. Actually, I think my answer is actually pretty clear. My like all-time probably most inspirational artist would be Imogen Heap. I just think she is just there's no word for her other than ethereal. She's just like this magical genius sprite fairy woman who's like just so smart and so just musically, it's like talented doesn't even cut it. I don't know. I just find her so fascinating as both a person and a musician, and she is like, I guess from a woman's perspective too, she's just so inspirational. I mean, she's like, I'm gonna do whatever and write my music, compose my music, you know, catapult people's musical careers into stardom because I see their worth and I bring them on my tour, and I'm going to invent these gloves that will read my hand motions and change my pitch. And I mean, she's just so advanced and so amazing. I don't know what else to say. Just unbelievable.
She's the one who did Hide and Seek, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the original, I mean, of course, that became, you know, a big hip-hop cover. But, I mean, like, that original, I remember there's a lot of, like, vocoder stuff happening in the background and really, really cool. Yeah,
I recommend her to everybody. I mean, I just think she has such a diverse catalog. And maybe in the same way that Dimebag was kind of a misunderstood figure, I mean, she's still alive, luckily, but she just strikes me as a person who would open up her heart and her mind to anybody who would want to ask anything about her music and her creative process. I mean, if I could, like, murder someone to do it, I would love to interview her, but I'm not at the caliber yet. Like, I would freak out. I wouldn't even know what to ask her. She just strikes me as very, very genuine. So, Mark, I have to ask you my last question then. Which you said you didn't do your homework for, and no one ever does, but if you could only listen to 3 albums the rest of your life, what would they be? Why? Okay,
so full disclosure, I did do my homework on this.
Yes! Okay, great.
So... Because one, I was prepping and I listened to your episode with Thank You Scientist, and I heard you ask them. I was like, oh, she's probably gonna ask me that. Yep. So, but also, I don't know if you remember, just before the pandemic, there was that Facebook meme where it's like, oh, post your 10 favorite albums over a week, and I did it like a nerd and wrote a list, and I remember the list. So,
perfect.
Yeah, my 3 desert island albums. Number 3 would be Ghost Reveries by Opeth.
Great.
You know, I don't know if you need an explanation for any of these or if you just want me to spout them out.
Whatever you want to do. I mean,
great
album.
It's like, you know, I remember that was like one of the first albums that Blabbermouth ever gave like a perfect 10 out of 10. It's just everything about that album is just awesome. Number 2, despite all these other bands I've gone into since then, number 2 is still And Justice for All by Metallica.
Okay.
You know, of course, it's got 1 on it, but I mean, and, you know, people talk about the lack of bass or whatever, but I mean, for me and what I'm into and drums and guitar and weird time signatures and fast guitar playing, I mean, it's got it all. I mean, Blackened, you know, I love the jam section of Frayed Ends of Sanity. To Live Is to Die. I mean, it's got their most brutal song, Dyer's Eve, which not enough people talk about. It's their fastest song. The lyrics are a suicide note, right? I mean, it's really heavy stuff.
It's an album for guitarists.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that album. That's my number 2 desert album to this day. And number 1, I got to go with the Dream Theater album. And do you remember one of the first things you said to me about Dream Theater?
Oh, God, I don't. Was it the night I met you at Howlers when I
Yeah.
think I was with Julia and Jerry Mulligan and
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think when you met me, I think I had a Dream Theater patch on my vest, but I don't have it on there, or I covered it. I forget. No, please tell me, because I don't remember.
Yeah. So I mentioned I was a Dream Theater nerd, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, Dream Theater, huh? So let me ask you, what's the best Dream Theater album, and why is it? And you said Octavarium.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Well, I'm not going with Octavarium.
Okay.
But I was curious if you would remember saying that to me.
That is my favorite.
I never forgot that.
Yeah, that's my favorite for sure.
I got to go with Scenes from Memory.
Okay, yeah.
Number 1 all-time favorite album by any artist, Scenes from Memory, Dream Theater. It's all that. I mean, you know, the production doesn't quite stand up to the most modern, albums, and like it's not the crispiest sounding album, but like the music is just so amazing, like every note, and it's a concept album, and it's like a reference back to this old song they did, and there's all these little tiebacks to it, and the playing's phenomenal. It's just favorite album.
That's an album I really do need to spend the time and sit down with, because I've heard it straight through, but I know I wasn't giving it my full attention. And it's just like, it has been such an inspiration for so many great musicians. Why should I not, give it its due diligence? So, excellent answers. Perfect. Mark, is there anything else you want to mention? I always drop links and stuff in the body of the post when the episode comes out, so you don't have to mention your social media links, but feel free if you want to. But then we can do our closing shot.
Yeah. No. Just please follow me on social. Kelly said she's dropping the links, but I have an Instagram page. I have a YouTube channel. I'd love you to subscribe to. I'm making more and more guitar content that I'm posting on Instagram and YouTube, and I'd love to get some more followers to try and get a following, whether I end up recording my own singles or joining another band. I'd love to go towards one of those. So yeah, just follow me on social, please. I'd love to interact with you.
Perfect. I will drop those links at the end. And then, Mark, I'm going to let you close this one out just because you have the information on the other alcohol we're going to be drinking right now.
Okay. So we started the show with beautiful Medovina, which is plum brandy distilled with honey. Very nice and smooth. What we have here is just what we call Šljivo or Šljivovitz, but we all affectionately call Šljivo. It's just plum brandy. It's the national drink of Serbia. Šljivo is pretty ubiquitous in a lot of Eastern European countries. I know, Bosnia, Croatia, a lot of them have versions of Šljivo. So this one might have a little bit more kick to it.
Okay. Oh, so I can already kind of smell it, but it doesn't have that honey sweetness, but it still smells so nice. Okay, so remind me again, what was the word?
The word was Živeli, and as we take this, I just want to say thank you again so much for having me on your show. I genuinely appreciate it, enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much for being here. All right. Živeli, everyone. One less Živeli. Thank you so much to Mark for providing not only great alcohol and great company, but teaching me a lot about Balkan and Eastern European music. I'm going to continue practicing my Greek in the meantime, so maybe I can't have such a horrendous introduction. And before you go, make sure you go follow Mark on social media. I will post the links in the body of the episode, but he's at www.mjxmusic.com if you want to get everything all in one. And then he's on Facebook at MJXFace, Instagram MJXgram, and Twitter MJXTweet. He's also on TikTok MJXTalk. Mark, I really approve of your site-specific URLs. As always, thanks for listening.